This topic, M&A landscape in valuation, apparently is very interesting. And why it is very interesting? Because when I was looking at this topic, uh, I was wondering as to what do I cover as part of this session. And it gave me a very good idea. And the idea is this topic can be looked at from two perspectives. One is M&A landscape and valuation, and the other aspect that we can look at is valuation in M&A landscape. So this topic can be looked at from both perspectives. So number one, it can be looked at from the angle of M&A landscape and valuation, and also valuation in M and merger and amalgamation landscape, and it's significant both ways. And that is what we are going to cover in this session today, uh, talking about the significance of valuation in case of mergers and amalgamations, and also significance of mergers and amalgamations for the valuation. And this is what we plan to cover, friends. Significance of M&A. Today, I'm sure all of you must be aware that the size of M&A has really been growing globally. And in the year 21, it has already crossed the mark of $5 trillion, 5 trillion US dollar. That is the size of this market that we already have today. And of course, bigger the size of M&A, apparently it would mean more scope for the valuation professionals. So that is the direct consequence of the M&A landscape on the valuation as a profession. So we will discuss these 2 points, and then we would also look at as to what are the consequences of this for we valuation professionals, and how do we tap those consequences, how do we tap those opportunities which are arising as a result of M&A landscape. We also look at this topic differently, and that is significance of valuation in M&A. Please remember, as the merger and amalgamations is going to have an impact on the valuation as a profession, at the same time, please remember, the M&A also needs the valuation for the M&A activities to keep going. Because ultimately, any decision in merger and amalgamation, if it has to be taken, that decision will have to be based on the valuation. So we would also look at this topic from the perspective of significance of valuation in case of merger and amalgamations. And that is where we understand very clearly that the valuation facilitates the decision making in case of merger and amalgamation, which is a non-fact to every one of us. The only thing, friends, that I would like to discuss with you in particular, and that is, can fair value be ever made fair really? Because we have seen in the recent past with some of the IPOs, and to mention is Paytm. Now the company came out with an IPO of more than 2,100 rupees per share, and it tanked by 40% within 2 days of trading. It has recovered to some extent, but not really fully. So obviously, some the merchant banker and the company and the private equity funds and all anchor investors who all have been part of the Paytm team, they must have taken all factors into account as to how to arrive at the value for pricing the IPO. Obviously, when they must have done all their discussions and everything, they must have thought that 2,150 rupees or whatever that amount is the fair value of Paytm as a company. Now, in reality, it doesn't appear to be. So the question is, can the fair value be ever made fair really? And if it is to be made fair really, then what is all that is required to be done so that remember, for issuing company, it does not make any difference. For the private equity which has invested into the company, to them also does not make any difference. To the anchor investor who put their money into the company, to them also it does not make any difference, because they have deep pockets. And not only they have deep pockets, but they also have made a lot of money from previous investments. So therefore any loss, the nose diving of the issue price of an IPO to all these big people will not make any difference. But a common investor really goes for a big shock, because a common investor who's putting his money through the IPOs, if the issue is tanking by 40%, he not only loses his money, but he also loses his complete confidence in the IPO market or in the capital market, which of course is not a good sign for the economy as a whole. So we would, and I would be very happy to hear your views, when we come to that part of the presentation and the discussion. I would be very happy to listen from all of you as to, is it really possible that a fair value is made really fair? Because apparently the price of 2150 or whatever that amount is wasn't really fair to a lot of investors who applied for the IPO of Paytm as a company. So that is what we intend to discuss, and of course we would also discuss as to what are the consequences of all this for we valuation professional, because ultimately all of us are valuation professional, and we are directly and indirectly interested in the development of the valuation professional as a whole. We are interested because ultimately as valuation professional we have a very big responsibility. And what is the big responsibility that we have? The responsibility which every one of us have on our shoulder are the expectations of the government of India, who brought out the valuation rules with an expectation that the valuation rules will result into better corporate governance, better governance of the valuation of the companies, and thereby reduce the shocks for common people. And that is the responsibility that we have. So that is the agenda that we have. Now, before I come to all these points and discuss them with you one by one, let me quickly give you a little introduction of mine. My name is Pramod Jain. Like all of you, I'm also registered valuer, and I'm practicing as a chartered accountant based in Pune. I worked in the industry for 20 years as CFO and legal head for companies in India, and then left my job because teaching and training was my passion, and I thought that you must always do things that you love and like. So I thought, okay, let me leave my job for 2 years, do teaching and training, and come back to the industry after working for after living your passion of teaching and training for 2 years. But then 2 years passed, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years passed, 6 years passed. The idea of going back to the industry never crossed my mind. And then out of blue, I got an offer from a company called ArcelorMittal, which is world's largest steel and mining company. I worked with them for 6 years. In those 6 years, delivered my training programs all over the globe in more than 50 locations, covering a wide variety of topics. Traveled the globe 4 times, and then I realized that life was becoming monotonous, and I thought I must do something different. So I left ArcelorMittal and started practicing as a chartered accountant. So when I started practicing as a chartered accountant, then the insolvency profession came, the insolvency IBC code came. I appeared for that exam, passed that exam, and I'm also practicing as insolvency professional. Though my focus is not on the CIRP, my focus is more on the advisory as far as the insolvency is concerned. Insolvency code is concerned. Then came the valuation, and I found that this is something which is very interesting. I'm pursuing valuation as a profession, as a passion, because this is something which I realize is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to really use our creativity and use our passion and make a difference, make a direct impact on the economic canvas of this country. So that is what I'm doing. I've authored 2 books. One is Finance for Value Creation, and the second book that I have authored is You Are a Born Winner. So these are the 2 books that I have authored. These books are already bestseller. Both these books are available on Flipkart and Amazon. I'm also a passionate cyclist and a marathoner. And why I'm sharing this with you, friends, is one single motive and objective, and that is we professionals need to play a longer inning. And if we professionals have to play a longer inning, what we need to do, we need to ensure that this machine that we have is maintained continuously and maintained in good running condition. And that is the reason I thought I would also share with you. So I'm a regular cyclist and marathoner and a regular practitioner of yoga, meditation and pranayama. So with this, friends, let us come and start our discussion. M&A landscape in valuation. Let me share with you, friends, some of the headlines or highlights about the M&A canvas in 2021 as to how the M&A canvas has been in 2021. Now, number one, global M&A volume has hit record high in 21, breaching 5 trillion mark for the first time. So that means $5 trillion worth of M&A transactions have taken place globally, and that is the landscape that we are talking about. The volumes have risen by 63% in 2021 against $5.63 million, and that is only by December 16. So I am sure some more transaction must have taken place after December 16 also. In that case, this number of 5.63 million trillion dollars would have still gone up. Excuse me. Now, global deal making is set to maintain its scorching pace next year as well, and the driver is easy availability of cheap financing and booming stock market. So that is what is driving the growth of M&A globally. The deal street, excuse me, Deal Street, which is a Singapore-based paywalled financial news website, also has shared with some details, and that is the year 2021 has have had in the Asia. So we are talking about now the Asia. So 2,224 deals have been done in the Asia, and involving $115 billion. So that is the size of the M&A landscape in Asia. As far as India is concerned, India also has had a record M&A volume in 2021, and this has increased by 80% over the last year. And this is detailed as per the a company called Bain and Company, which is a company that is into compiling and the data analysis for the M&A. Not only that, friends, Indian startups have clocked $9.5 billion via exits, among its largest ever. So not only globally the M&A has breached the mark of 5 trillion, and in Asia it has had a record number of transactions and also the record volume. In India also it has crossed the record ever existed in the past, and plus the Indian startup have clocked $9.5 billion by exit. So you can imagine the kind of amount which are involved in case of M&A transactions. Locally, to give you some flavor about locally, so SDFC Life has completed the acquisition of a company called Exide. I'm sure you all must have heard about it, read about it in the newspaper. And then Dewan Housing Finance Limited has been acquired by the Piramal Capital, which is now opening 100 branches. Where again the value of this transaction was running into about 20,000 crore. Plus, you have a merger of Z Sony, which of course was in news of some wrong reasons as well, because Invesco, which was an equity investor into Z, they had a lot of reservations with the management of Z, and that's how they were opposing. But somehow the matter went to the court and litigation, as much as up to the stage of Supreme Court. But finally, as we read in the newspaper, so a mega merger of Z and Sony TV is also happening. It does not stop here, Then you have a company called Byju's. I'm sure you all must be reading about it and watching it on the television. Baizu is likely to go public with a spec which is a specific purpose acquisition company spec, and they have already raised $6.8 billion in November. So just imagine, up till now we were talking about the unicorns, and now we will start talking in terms of the decacorns. So unicorns looks like is going to be the thing of past, and now what is going to be the things of the current hour, and that is decacorn, and that's where this company has raised $6.8 billion. As you can imagine, and this is only happening through the private equity and things like that. In case of renewable energy project acquisition, there has been a jump of fourfold to $6 billion in Jan and October. So again, look at the canvas of the M&A in this country. That the project renewable energy projects, there is a jump of fourfold in the acquisition of such companies, resulting into an investment of $6 billion, and which is only for the period Jan and October. And I'm sure some more transactions have taken place even after October, so from November and December, and this amount would have further gone up. How are the attitude of the regulators in this country as far as the M&A activities are concerned? So the regulators' approach to M&A, SEBI amends delisting rules to make M&A more convenient. So the regulators are working very proactively towards the M&A activities, and the SEBI is making changes have made the changes in delisting rules for making M&A more convenient. SEBI proposes cap on startup IPO proceeds for merger and acquisition, and which I think is a sensible move in my opinion, because a lot of these startup IPOs who are raising money through the IPOs, they are not only raising money for the regular investment in their main venture, but they are also acquiring money for the mergers and acquisition. Now, this, in my view, can be a dangerous sign. And why it can be a dangerous sign? Because a company which is a startup, it is better for the startup to focus on the main activity of the startup rather than going for mergers and acquisitions, raising money for the mergers and acquisitions. Please remember, in the kind of hype which is sometimes built in the markets, it is possible for a company to raise a lot of money, and that is because share markets, as we all know, are many times driven by the sentiments and not by the fundamentals. So it is possible for a company which is IPO raising money and raising money for the mergers and amalgamations as well. But if these mergers and amalgamations are not in the related activities, then it can be dangerous not only for the company itself, for the startup itself, but also for the market sentiment as a whole. So, and that is where the SEBI is now proposing a cap on the startup IPO proceeds for merger and acquisition. That means SEBI is proposing a cap as to how much maximum amount the startup IPO can raise for the purpose of M&A activities. Remember, so long as the funds which are being raised by the startup IPO are to be used for the purpose of the main activity of the startup, I think this is perfectly fine. But if it is going into the unrelated activities, then there can be a challenge. And the example, of course, is Ola. I'm sure Ola has launched electric scooter, and they have done massive booking already. They have raised a lot of money. They have done a lot of booking also, asking people to pay 499 rupees for booking one scooter. But as far as the delivery of the product is concerned, it is delayed beyond whatever time that they had committed, and people are not sure as to what is going to happen in future. So we hope and pray and wish that the Ola Electric would be able to really complete the project and start delivering the electric scooter in the quickest possible time. But remember, getting into an activity which is not your core competence sometimes can be dangerous, sometimes can be fatal, and that is the need, that is the care that needs to be taken. And I'm sure SEBI's move in putting the cap is in the right direction. SEBI is also coming out with rules which are to make the M&A easier. Then, of course, in respect of the GST, also there is a relief for M&A, and this highlights the importance of the M&A as an activity. This highlights a recognition of M&A as an activity for the growth of the entire economy, and that is the reason why now there's a provision that selling business company piecemeal should not attract GST, says AAR ruling. So advanced assessment ruling is given, and saying that in case if a company is being sold not as an entity as a whole, but it is being sold in piecemeal, then earlier as per the provision of the GST, if a company is being sold, then there was no issue of GST applicability. But if the company is being sold in bits and pieces, then of course GST becomes applicable as per the provisions of the GST laws. But now there is an advanced ruling, and that says that in case if company is being sold in piecemeal, that also would not attract GST. So these are this is to highlight the approach of the regulators, and when it is approach of the regulator, of course it is the approach of the government as well towards the growth and development of M&A as an activity. Friends, we understand it very well. M&A is good for the economy. And why M&A is good for the economy? Because when the two companies are merging together, obviously it is resulting into synergy, and that synergy is additional benefit owing to the combination of two companies, and that additional benefit ultimately is going to help the economy as a whole. And that is how the regulators are also taking a very proactive approach towards the mergers and amalgamations. SEBI board revises delisting norms to streamline M&A. So now, under the current regulation, a company that is acquiring 49% stake in a listed entity and sees its total stake rise over 75 marks post an open offer. So company acquired 49%, made an open offer, and because of an open offer, the acquirer's holding is going beyond 75%. So now the SEBI has revised the delisting norms. In that case, that acquirer will be forced to bring his holding below the level of 75, since it is a listing entity. So friends, these are the approach as far as the approach of the regulators towards the M&A. Now, what are the headlines as far as the M&A is concerned globally when we talk about the M&A landscape? Forbes to go public by a $630 million SPAC merger, which is Special Purpose Acquisition Company. SPAC is Special Purpose Acquisition Company, to expand its consumer business. And so is Forbes, which is the oldest media outlet in the United States, will merge with Hong Kong-based Magnum Opus Acquisition Limited, a SPAC led. So this is at the global level. Of course, I'm just giving you a gist of what is happening in the landscape. To cover all those activities would of course will need a lot more time. And then there's a company called Grab, which is a company, Singapore-based company. So Grab made a debut on the Nasdaq, and it was expected that this debut will set a tone for Southeast Asian tech listings. But incidentally, or by the way, Grab's listing slumps in US debut after record SPAC merger. So the merger of Grab and is listing on the Nasdaq. After the listing, this company Grab's price on the stock market came down by more than 20%. So which is something like, what happened to Paytm. Of course, in case of Paytm, the slide was 40%. In case of Grab, this is 20%. But again, the point that I'm trying to highlight here is the same question. Can the fair value really be made fair? And if yes, then how? Otherwise, a situation of this kind should not happen. If a company is being priced, if an IPO is being priced,
Recording in progress.
if an IPO is being brought out and is being priced by the professional, and if there is such a slide in the listed price, then it really puts a big question mark as to was the company's management or the invest merchant banker or the advisors of the company, could they really understood at that point in time as to what was the fair value for this company. So these are the highlights.
Sir,
High.
your screen is not sharing actually.
All right, okay, no worries. I'll just do it once again. Was it not shared from the beginning or now only?
Oh, we know.
Okay, I think it got disconnected, so just give me a second. Am I audible otherwise clearly? Can you see it now?
Yes, sir, now I can see.
Very good. Thank you. Am I audible otherwise to everyone?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So let's continue from where we left. Okay. So these are the highlights and the major headlines as far as the global M&A landscape is concerned. Just to give you a quick update on the M&A with regard to India, the recent major M&A deals. So the latest one, of course, is the Z Entertainment with Sony India, Indus Tower with Bharti Infratel, Vodafone Idea, of course, is it's a old one. ArcelorMittal, of course, it's again a relatively old one, but ArcelorMittal was one of the big merger deals, M&A deals. Tata with Chorus, Walmart acquisition of Flipkart, and Vodafone Hush SR, which of course has taken place some time back, and the Reliance and Future Retail, which of course currently we all know is currently in dispute and has been put on hold by the judicial authorities because Amazon threw a spanner into this deal because of certain disagreement that they had with Future Retail. But I'm sure sooner than later they will find out some way out, and they would definitely will have to find out something, give and take, and this deal will of course go through. And I'm sure all of you would be aware. This is where the valuation professionals really have to note because since the future Reliance a merger has not taken place, I'm sure you must have read about it that Future Retail has defaulted in making payment of 3,000 crores of debt. So you can understand, we can understand it very well as to what are the implications the valuation can have on these deals. And then, of course, many mergers that have taken place as a result of the NCLT. So you have SR Steel getting merged with ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel, and then you have Bhushan Steel merging with Tata Steel. So these are the mergers, big mega mergers that have taken place in this country. Now, what are the consequences of these deals on we professionals? So ये जो mergers हैं इनका हम लोगों पर क्या impact है? So number one, of course, is this volume of M&A that has taken place globally in Asia and in India. So bigger the size of the M&A deals, that means bigger is the scope for the valuation professionals, and that means all of us. It also means that it offers excellent opportunities for adding value to the profession as well as for ourselves. So all these mega M&A landscape that we are talking about would mean that there's a huge scope for the valuation professional. The only thing is that who will be able to take advantage of this M&A size mega M&A landscape, please remember, it's not that the individual valuation professional will be able to take the benefit of these mega deals. No, the benefits of all these mega deals will accrue to the valuation firms which are big in size, because ultimately remember, size does matter, and that means it is again a consequence for all of us that we need to start thinking in terms of as to how to make our size big. It's only when our size is big we would be able to take benefit of all these mega mergers and M&A landscape. Now, my question, the question which must be coming to the minds of every one of you is, what are the drivers of mega M&A activities and attraction for new age companies? So, if I ask, if in case you would like to answer this question, क्या लगता है आपको? What is the reason for the M&A size breaching the mark of $5 trillion in the year 2021? And please remember, M&A landscape, M&A size breaching the mark of $5 trillion in 2021, which happens to be a COVID year, which happens to be a pandemic year. What can be the reason? What can be the driver for such voluminous activity transactions happening in the M&A landscape? In case somebody would like to share, you can please speak up. What are the drivers? What do you think is driving this mega M&A landscape, which is happening not only in India, not only in Asia, but globally? Anyone? So let me see in case somebody has answered. Okay, thank you. So I can hear. Okay, so yes, CS Joshi, please go ahead. You can speak. Or maybe you can write your response in the chat box and I would be able to read it out for you and for everyone. What you think are the mega driver for the mega M&A landscape, not only in India but also globally? Okay, so all right, no worries. So friends, I am sure we all have heard of these companies, uh, Alibaba, Amazon, Flipkart, IRCTC, Make My Trip, Jeevan Sati, Naukri.com, Big Basket, Paytm, Freshwork, Uber Eats, Policy Bazaar, FirstCry, InMobi, Yatra.com, Swiggy, Pesa.com, Grofers, Ola Cab, Delivery, Lenskart, Urban Ladder, Pepperfry, Byju's, Udaan, Renew Power, BillDesk, Pine Lab, Dreams, Rivigo, Ola Electric, Airbnb, Zerodar, Cashify, Redbus, Epic Cash, Spotify, MobiQuick, Misho, JustPay, No Broker, Cars24, Spinny, CarTrade, Car Deco Slice. I'm sure all of us have heard of these companies, and interestingly, most of these companies, which at least I'm aware of, are incurring losses. Yet all these companies are getting very attractive valuations. So today when you open Economic Times or Business Standard or Financial Times, what do you read? You read company XYZ.
Recording in progress.
So what do we read? We read company XYZ raised $400 million at a valuation of $2 billion, and the news would also say that this company X 5 months back had raised earlier.
Also, can mute yourself.
And we what we read in the newspaper, in Economic Times or Financial Express or any of these business magazines, company XYZ raised $400 million at a valuation of $2 billion. And this news would also read that this XYZ had raised another $200 million 3 months back, when at a valuation of $1 billion. Now you start wondering as to how a company called XYZ was valued at $1 billion 3 months back, and in 3 months time this company is getting valued at $2 billion. So what miracle this company has done in 3 months, or what activity this company has undertaken, or what growth this company has achieved in a period of 3 months, that this company's valuation has gone up from $1 billion to $2 billion. Now this is the question, friends, which I am sure must be coming in the minds of every one of you. And this question should come. And why this question should come? Because it will be an eye opener, and it will be an eye opener in two sense number one, that is this valuation of $1 billion from of $2 billion from $1 billion in 3 months time, does it really have something strong in the foundation, or it is only a hollow figure by the people who are trying to raise funds now and then tap the IPO market later? Just 1 minute.
Recording in progress.
Looks like some signal challenge, and I'm going to connect here, but not to worry. Am I audible, please? Am I audible? Mr. Rajora, am I audible? Lalit, can you mention once again, am I audible to you?
Recording in progress.
Am I audible, please? Just confirm.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. And can you see my PPT also on your screen?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So these are the companies, friends, who most of them are making losses, yet they are getting very attractive valuations. And remember, they are not only getting attractive valuations, but they are also are able to raise money from the private equity or from the venture capital funds or from anchor investors and things like that. So the question that comes to our mind, obviously, as a valuation professional, is what is that which is resulting into such high valuations of these companies? Are they really doing something miraculous? That you read in the newspaper, XYZ raised $500 million at a valuation of $2 billion, whereas just 3 months back, this company had raised another $3 million at a valuation of $1 billion. So a question that comes to our mind is, what is that which is making it happen? And that is what we need to understand. So even though, friends, all these companies are incurring losses, getting huge valuations, now the answer to this question is, why is that? And friends, in my view, it is because, number one, new set of challenges of growing global population. So we all understand that the new economy, not only in India but globally, with the growing size of the population, the kind of problems which are being faced all over the world are also undergoing a change. Gone are the days when the global economies could afford to be inefficient, could afford to be inefficient. And these new age companies that I have just spoken about, whether it is whether it is uh, Ola or Uber or IRCTC or TCS or Airbnb or Paytm or Zomato, all these companies, you know what they are doing? They are addressing the second point, and the second point is these companies are making the systems more efficient. These companies are making systems more efficient. So please remember, why does Zomato gets such huge valuations? And it's not for anything else. It is because what Zomato is doing, Zomato is removing inefficiencies from the system. Now, why IRCTC is getting so huge valuations? Because what IRCTC is doing, it is removing inefficiencies from the system. Why is DMart getting so huge valuations? Of course, DMart is into a different genre, but why DMart is getting so huge valuations? Because I'm sure if you go to any outlet of DMart today, you would see there's a long queue of people waiting outside the DMart. And why is that so? And that is because for whatever reasons, for bringing in efficiency into the supply chain that DMart has, they are able to sell the same product much cheaper than the at the price at which it is available at the other outlets. So the drivers for the M&A activity and for the new age companies is making these systems more efficient.
Recording in progress.
Looks like too much of disturbances because of poor signal, but that is how it happens. But of course, remember, as far as the private equity funds are concerned, as far as the venture capital funds are concerned, what are what is their driver? And their driver is maximizing return for themselves. I'm sure all of you would have noticed in case of this company called Zomato, where the company came out with a public issue for a share of 1 rupee at 76, and the issue got listed almost about at 145 or something like thereabout. Uh, Now there's a company called InfoAge. InfoAge had invested 10 years back into Zomato a small amount of few hundred, crore, 5-10 crores, and I was told that this amount became almost 5,000 crore when the issue of Zomato was listed. So those are the drivers for the private equity and the venture capital funds.
Recording in progress.
But also you can switch off your video and share the slide and speak, sir.
Is it okay? My video is off in any case, I suppose. Or are you able to see my video? Is it off now?
Hi, it is off now, sir.
Okay, good. I hope that sometimes I don't know for.
You
Okay,
share the screen, sir.
okay, yeah, I'm just going to do that. Is it visible, Mr. Rajora? Is my PPT visible to you?
The voice is not coming.
The voice is not coming. Okay.
now it is coming, sir.
All right. I sometimes I don't know why, but how does it happen? Because generally I've seen that these sessions go on quite smoothly, and sometimes there are continuous interruptions, and I think today is one of those days. Right. So, friends, let's now come to the second aspect. So we looked at M&A landscape and valuation. Now let us look at valuation in M&A landscape. So we all know it very well that for M&A to happen, valuation is an absolute must. Because what is valuation? Valuation is a very powerful tool that facilitates decision making. So all these deals worth more than 5 trillion US dollars which have taken place in the year 2021, remember, could become possible only because of use of valuation as a tool for deciding the price at which this transaction should be done. So the significance of valuation in the M&A landscape hardly needs any overemphasis. There are many purposes which are served by the valuation, as we all know. Merger and amalgamation, of course, is one of them. Now, what are the forms of corporate restructuring or the mergers and amalgamation? That is what we need. That is what we need to look at. So the different forms of M&A can be absorption, as in case of Tomco and Hindustan Unilever. It can be a takeover or tender offer. It can be locally or it can be globally. So today it is possible to merge a global company with Indian company and vice versa. It can be a case of asset acquisition, where a company which is Hindustan Unilever acquiring the brand name of Lakme. It can be strategic in the form of strategic stake. That's where ArcelorMittal once upon a time had a stake in a company called Uttam Galva. It can be in the form of buyback, and we recently have seen the example of TCS coming out with a buyback of 18,000 crore worth of buyback. And you can imagine the kind of funds that we are talking about. It can be for divestment or divesture by the government going for privatization. It can also be in the form of joint venture. So you have a joint venture between Tata and Fiat, which of course are competitors otherwise, but entering into a joint venture where Tata is able to use the facilities of Fiat for producing its own car there. The joint venture between Greaves and Piaggio, joint venture between ArcelorMittal and Sumitomo for the acquisition of SR Steel. That of course has happened very recently. The example of joint venture can be DCM Group and Daewoo Motors. It doesn't stop at that. So you have some other forms of M&A, which is slump sale and asset sale, demerger. The example is of L&T and UltraTech Cement. Reliance demerging into 4 companies. I am sure all of you would know. About 10 years back, after the sad demise of the great legend Sri Dhirubhai Ambani, when the two sons were fighting among themselves, between themselves, the Reliance as an entity had to be demerged into 4 different companies which were shared between 2 brothers. So that is an example of demerger. And again, all these transactions, please remember, this is are the part of the M&A landscape, and that is possible only with the help of professional valuation. Equity carve out, where offer of shares are made by way of IPOs or by way of offer for sale. So you have an example of promoters making offer for sale in case of Endurance Limited or in case of Elchem Limited. It can be spin-off, again remember, so even if spin-off are part of the M&A landscape, the example that I can quote immediately is of Kotak Group spinning off its investment banking division into a subsidiary, Kotak Mahindra Capital Corporation, split of RIL that I have already mentioned. Delisting. So again, remember, delisting in a way is again a part of the corporate restructuring. And the examples that I can quote is Castrol India, Philips, SR Shipping, SR Ports, Alfa Laval, and so many of them in India. And in US, of course, it was the Levi Strauss and Company in US, which was also delisted. Then you have a leveraged buyout happening, and the classic example of the leveraged buyout is the acquisition of SR Steel by the joint venture of ArcelorMittal and Sumitomo Steel of Japan. And then what we need to also understand is what can be the motives or reasons behind these corporate restructuring. So the motive behind the corporate restructuring or all these M&A deals, one is synergy, and second is focus on core competence. Once, Tomco, I'm sure you must have heard of Tata Oil Mills Company, was one of the major big companies of the Tata Group, but Tata's decided to focus on their core competence, and they realized that toiletries was not their core competence, and therefore Tata's decided to sell off the company called Tomco, and they sold it to Hindustan Unilever. Focus on core competence, a company called Greaves was predominantly into making the engines for various purposes, and they thought that they can take the advantage of their engine technology by going for forward integration. And as part of the forward integration, they thought they would also start making three-wheeler rickshaws, and they did. They started a three-wheeler auto company, and they started producing a three-wheeler called Garuda. Unfortunately, it failed miserably. Company was bleeding because of the production of Garuda, and they thought that they need to now come back and focus on their core competency, that was making engine, and that is how they entered into a joint venture. And then finally, of course, that joint venture got merged into Piaggio. A tax shield can be another reason, another motive for the M&A. Leadership position is major driver for the M&A to happen. So I'm sure all of you must be aware that there used to be a group called Mittal Steel. It was a global steel group, and the Mittal Steel was owned by Mr. Lakshinivas Mittal, and Mr. Mittal thought to become a global leader, truly a global leader as far as the steel and mining was concerned, and that is how he went on acquiring companies all over the globe. As a result of that, they also acquired a company called Arcelor, and that is how now the combined entity is known as ArcelorMittal. The M&A can also be for the purpose of product range extension. Tata Motors once upon a time was producing all kinds of four-wheelers, but they were not into multi-axle vehicles. And for them to enter into multi-axle vehicles, the solution was to set up a greenfield project, but the better course of action was to acquire a company called Daewoo in Korea, which was already into multi-axle manufacturing. So the another motive for M&A is also to go for product range extension. Managerial efficiencies, market entry. So Tata Tea wanted to become a global tea company, and that is how they acquired Tetley Tea in UK, and now now the Tata Tea is a global tea company. Likewise, Walmart wanting to have presence in India, and that is how they acquired Flipkart as a company. Diversification can be another motive for the M&A to happen. It can be also inorganic growth. So Kotak Bank acquiring ING Vyasa Bank, the driver or the motive behind acquisition of ING was to have the expansion of the network. So the moment Kotak acquired ING Vyas as a bank, all the branches automatically got added to the network of Kotak Bank. So this is another driver as far as the M&A is concerned. Government divestment, of course. So BSNL being sold to Tata Communication, and then BSNL getting merged into Tata Communication is an example where the government wanted to do the divestment and go for the privatization. Balco, which was a government company, and that was sold to Sterlite, which is Anil Agarwal owned company, and instantly, friends, and that is what you must notice. Mr. Anil Agarwal, who is the owner of the Sterlite Group, he has recently made an announcement that he is earmarking 21,000 crores of his wealth for the purpose of promoting education in India. And remember, friends, that is what is true businessmanship. That is what is true businessmanship, because that is what is the purpose of every business. So that is an example of good governance, and that is also an example of why a company, why people would resort to M&A. Balco being sold to Anil Agrawal. Market orientation. Once upon a time, there used to be ICICI Limited, and there was ICICI Limited started as a subsidiary ICICI Bank. Later, the KV Kamath, who was the head of ICICI at that point in time, realized that it's better for them to orient towards the banking rather than on corporate lending, merely on corporate lending. And that is how the parent company was merged into the subsidiary company, and ICICI Limited now stands as ICICI Bank. It can be also by way of bailout. So we know Jio acquiring Reliance Communications. It's nothing but to help his brother out, by Mukesh Ambani to Anil Ambani. Consequences of IBC. So there are so many companies as a result of IBC are changing hands. The management of so many companies have been changing hands in the recent past, and in more often than not, whenever hands have changed of these companies, now the companies have merged into the acquiring companies. So Tata Steel, which acquired Bhushan Steel, now Bhushan Steel is getting merged into Tata Steel. SR Steel, which was acquired by the joint venture of Arcelor Nippon Steel, is now merged into ArcelorMittal and Nippon Steel joint venture. Sometimes there can be market compulsions also for the M&A, and Idea Vodafone, I am sure all of you are aware, is nothing but market compulsion, because with the advent of Jio in the telecom sector, the life of all the telecom companies really became difficult, and as a result of that, Vodafone and Idea thought it better to merge together. Of course, they are still struggling, but I am sure in the days to come, things would be better for them. Sahara getting merged into Jet Airways. Jet Airways, of course, because of the bad management closing down, that's a different story altogether. But ultimately, the reason behind Sahara's merger into Jet Airways was the market compulsions. Universal Luggage being acquired by Bloplast. Tomco, as I mentioned to you, getting merged into Hindustan Unilever. And Hyderabad Elwin, which was making refrigerators in this country about 20 years back, getting merged into Voltas. And Sony and Z, of course, is the latest example on this canvas of M&A. So, friends, this is the canvas of the merger and amalgamation that we have. Now, coming quickly, I will just take another 5 minutes. So, coming quickly, how about the valuation of these companies? So, when it comes to the valuation of the M&A deals, ultimately, as far as India is concerned, and global market is concerned, we will need to be governed by the Ind AS 113, and globally it will be IFRS 13. So the Ind AS 113, which is on fair value measurement, talks in terms of three approaches: income approach, market approach, and the cost approach. At the same time, Ind AS 113 does not spell out, does not stipulate, does not mandate any particular approach. It only talks in terms of three approaches, but it gives a hierarchy of the fair value hierarchy, and the hierarchy has got level 1 input, level 1 input, level 2 input, level 3 input. So level 1 input would mean that in case of valuation of a company which is listed on an exchange, then the reference point for the purpose of valuation will need to be used, which is the listed price of that entity. Level 2 input is, it talks about input other than the quoted price. So in case if an entity is not listed on a stock market, and if the transaction is to be done into that company, whether by way of merger and acquisition or by any other mode for that matter, So how should the evaluation be done? The Index 113 talks in terms of label 2 input, and label 2 input would mean that input other than the quoted price. So that means that's where I would say the market approach will come on the fore. So a company which is not listed and has to merge, then for which listed price is not available. So how to do the evaluation of this entity? The evaluation of this entity will be done based on the observable input, and that means what? That means market approach will be used for doing the evaluation of an entity to which the label 2 input will be applicable. Now then the Index 113 talks in terms of label 3 input, and now what is label 3 input? So, and where label 3 input will be applicable? So you have a company, and this company is not listed, and for this company observable input is also not available. Then how do you do the evaluation? So you will do the evaluation by using the unobservable input. Now what is the meaning of unobservable input? The meaning of unobservable input is that you will try and create input, use that input for the purpose of valuation of that company. And I would say, what would it mean? In my view, it would mean using the discounted cash flow. So the label 3 input in my view would mean use the discounted cash flow method. And all said and done, friends, in my view, whether it is M&A or it is IPO or it is anything else for that matter, ultimately, well, the right approach or right method for valuation of an entity is the discounted cash flow, because ultimately it's the money that matters. So value of an entity can be decided only in terms of what kind of value it is going to generate in the future. And the best way to measure any benefit or any value is to convert that in terms of money. So when you are able to convert the benefit in terms of money, in my view, I would feel and I would think that that is going to be the most appropriate valuation. Only precaution that needs to be taken is the assumptions in arriving at the cash flow have to be absolutely most authentic. So this is all, friends, that I thought I would share with you about this topic of M&A landscape and valuations. So this is how I would think. Now there are a few things that I would like to share with you before I close, and that is, number one, please remember we have this scenario obviously has tremendous value for all professionals. It confirms that the scope for the evaluation professional is huge in size. And just to give you an idea, that the merchant bankers in the year 2021 have collected a fees of 2,200 crores. Of course, this not only includes valuation is one part of it, it also includes the management of the entire issue. But you can imagine the size of the scope for the professionals. What we need to take care is that the private equity, issuer company, merchant banker nexus can be fatal for the investor. Unfortunately or incidentally, many a times the deals can be driven only by one single motive, and that is how to maximize my cash flow. And that is where many a times the valuations can be faulty, the valuations can be lofty, and if the valuations are faulty, if the valuations are lofty, the sufferer is going to be the end investor, and that care needs to be taken care of. So as valuation professional, we have a responsibility to ensure that the valuations are not lofty or not faulty, as the example of Grab listed in US or Paytm listed in India. Of course, the chief promoter of Paytm has his own view to express, and I wish and pray and hope that whatever views that he is expressing come true at the soonest possible, and the price of Paytm regains is at least issue price in the earliest time possible. So there is a huge scope for professional growth for all of us, but size matters, and that is all of us will need to remember. If we keep on working as valuation professional as an individual, there is very little that we would be able to do. But if we form entities and become a sizable group, then of course we would be able to tap this potential in much more efficient and effective way. So networking of the highest order is required. Continuous updation by keeping abreast with the latest development and changes is absolute must. So what is happening in the valuation, what is happening in IPO, what is happening in the capital market, what is happening in the data analytics, what is happening on the artificial intelligence, what is happening, what are the other tools and techniques available for we professionals, so that we are able to give better value to our clients. Now that is what we will need to continuously keep on updating from time to time. And finally, friends, I would feel and think that there is a need to focus on research using data analysis. Size of the market is huge. The expectations of the customers and the clients are also huge. So if the market has to be tapped, if the expectations of the clients and the customers are to be met, then we will also need to focus on research and keep on knowing from time to time as to what is happening where, and what are its ramifications on our profession, on my profession, on my activities, on my competency, on my capabilities. Now that is what we will need to continuously keep on working. So friends, with this, of course, I come to the end of my session, and I'm now going to make it open for another 5 minutes. And in case if there are any questions, I would be very happy to take them. Thank you so much. Thank you.